Some families don't talk about certain things, not because they forgot, because somebody decided, generations ago, that it was safer not to. Between 1760 and this year, Jamaica has run real criminal cases against people accused of practicing Obeah, the island's word for a kind of spiritual power the law itself was afraid of. Not folklore. Actual court records, actual verdicts, actual names written down by a clerk in a courtroom. One of tonight's 15 is barely a few months old. Tonight, we're going through 15 surnames connected to something dark. Real curses believed hard enough to survive centuries. A poet who admitted in her own handwriting that she was afraid her family was cursed, and a religious community near Spanish Town that got dragged into court in 1899 for the crime of praying together the wrong way. If your surname shows up tonight, this isn't a legend somebody invented for a tour guide. This is a courtroom record with your family's name already in it. Obea was made illegal in Jamaica in 1760, right after Tacky's Rebellion, because the men who led that uprising had Obeah practitioners advising them, giving them courage and protection before they fought. The law that followed wasn't really about magic. It was about fear of exactly what Obeah represented, a source of power the enslavers didn't control. That law stayed on the books for nearly 200 years. People were tried under it during slavery, and they were still being tried under it in the 20th century. Healers, religious leaders, balm yard operators, ordinary people accused by a neighbor who didn't like them. Every single case left a paper trail. Tonight, we're reading 15 of those names back. Drop your surname and parish below. And if your family has a story about this that only gets whispered, or one that stopped getting told altogether, tell us. Subscribe if this is new to you. New records, new surnames, every week. Quick note before we get into it. The pinned comment has our Jamaican Surnames ebook, 100 authentic surnames researched in depth. Full list is in the pinned comment, so check if yours is there before you buy anything. Every purchase keeps this research going. 15 names. Let's go. Palmer. This is the name behind the most famous ghost story in Jamaica. Annie Palmer, the so-called White Witch of Rose Hall, said to have murdered 3 husbands and countless enslaved men before being killed herself by an Obeah man named Taku. It's been a novel, a song by Johnny Cash, and the single most told duppy story on the island. Here's what almost nobody mentions on the tour. A Jamaica Archives researcher went looking for the actual court and estate records in the 1960s and found no evidence any Mrs. Palmer of Rose Hall was ever murdered by anyone. The title White Witch wasn't even used during her actual lifetime. It was invented by a novelist in 1929, nearly a century after slavery ended. The legend and the archive are 2 completely different stories. Barrett, Elizabeth Barrett Browning, one of the most celebrated poets in the English language, came from a Jamaican planter family whose fortune was built on the Cinnamon Hill estate in St. James. In 1855, she wrote to a friend that she belonged to a family of West Indian slaveholders, and that if she actually believed in curses, she would genuinely be afraid of one. That's the family's own descendant, in her own handwriting, naming the thing directly. Not a legend somebody invented for a brochure. Winter. In the decades after Obeah was first outlawed in 1760, an enslaved man surnamed Winter was tried and convicted in the slave court of St. Thomas in the East. He was sentenced to transportation, permanently removed from the island as punishment. His name is one of the earliest Obeah convictions on record anywhere in Jamaica. Now, jump forward to June 1899, near Spanish Town. A religious community had been meeting for years at a place called Beggar's Bush Pen. holding healing services, until a neighbor who didn't like them, a man named Charles Shirley, reported them to the police for, in his words, nothing but Obeah being practiced. Almost every person arrested that day was convicted. Reynolds. Rosabelle Reynolds ran the group. Witnesses said she believed sickness could be caused by other people's Obeah, and treated it accordingly. She didn't think of herself as an Obeah practitioner. The court disagreed. She was convicted anyway. Walters. Julius Walters, 24 years old, was the group's parson. His own father, William Walters, testified against him in court, describing his son's religion as, quote, jumping up and turning around and shouting, "Hallelujah." A father testifying against his own son's faith, on the record, forever. Thomas. Joseph Thomas led the choir. Leonora Thomas was also arrested and convicted the same day. Two people with the same surname, swept up in the same case. Morgan. George Morgan, convicted alongside the others at Beggar's Bush Pen that same June. Henry, Miriam Henry, the same case, the same conviction. Stevens. Joseph Stevens completed the group. 7 people total, arrested for praying together in a way one angry neighbor decided to call witchcraft. Forbes. Roseanne Forbes, known across Jamaica as Mammy Forbes, ran one of the most important balm-yards on the island for at least 30 years, alongside her husband, George. She was prosecuted twice, once for Obeah, once for practicing medicine without a license. Whatever the courts called it, generations of Jamaicans quietly came to her for healing anyway. Bailey. Not every name in these records belonged to the person on trial. In 1831, in the parish then called St. Dorothy, now part of Clarendon, an enslaved man named Polydor was convicted of practicing Obeah on a man named Reed Bailey and sentenced to transportation for life. If your surname is Bailey, this isn't your family accused of anything. It's the other side of the story. The record of someone your family believed had been cursed badly enough to take it to a criminal court. Daly. In 1913, a woman named Cecilia Daly was charged in Jamaica alongside a man named Frank Campbell, not with Obeah directly, but with vagrancy, for actions the Daily Gleaner reported at the time amount to Obeah. The court didn't quite have the legal footing to call it Obeah outright, so vagrancy became the charge that stuck instead. Same suspicion, different paperwork. Campbell, Frank Campbell, charged in that same 1913 case alongside Cecilia Daly. This channel already told you once where a Campbell's surname likely traces to, in Africa. Tonight, it's a completely different kind of record. A Campbell standing in a Jamaican courtroom, accused of something the law itself was too uncertain to properly name. Grant. This one isn't even history yet. In 2025, a man named O'Shawn Grant was arrested in Montego Bay, St. James, after police searched his home and found it filled with incense smoke, candles arranged in a ritual pattern, and boxes labeled Money Rain, Money House, and African Powers. He pleaded guilty. The judge fined him and told him to read his Bible. 265 years after Obeah was first outlawed in Jamaica, someone carrying this surname was still standing in front of a judge for it this year. Brooks. Actually, one more before we close. In 1964, 2 years after Jamaica became independent, a woman named Cindy Brooks was arrested after receiving a package from the United States, holy oil, and a book called Occultism, Arts and Science, sent by a Chicago occult supplier called the DeLawrence Company. In court, Brooks explained she'd ordered it because duppies were disturbing her sleep. The judge didn't buy the explanation. She was fined £25 for practicing Obeah and for possessing instruments of Obeah, one of the last people in Jamaica ever convicted under that law, before prosecutions largely stopped, right up until O'Shawn Grant's case reopened the same question this year. 15 names tonight, and every single one came from an actual courtroom, not a campfire story. One of them from a courtroom this very year. A law that lasted over 2.5 centuries, built out of fear, turned ordinary religious gatherings, ordinary healers, one poet's private guilt, and one man's bedroom full of candles into something written down forever. None of this is really about curses. It's about what a society decides to be afraid of, and who it decides to punish for it. Then, and apparently, still now. Drop your surname and perish below. If the ebooks ever helped, it's linked in the pinned comment, full list included, so you can check before you buy. If your family hid something, the record usually didn't forget. It just waited for somebody to ask.